Insights from local experts understanding Ethiopia's unique culture. Ethiopia is located in the Horn of Africa, bordering Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. The country has the second biggest population in Africa, with over 50% of people being under 25 years of age. Due to the vast size of the population, it is important to recognize that descriptions of Ethiopian cultural customs can vary significantly. There are many distinct cultural practices that are specific to people's region, ethnicity, or religion. Despite this diversity, Ethiopians are generally united by their patriotism and pride in the country's overarching cultural identity. Habesha culture and identity. Ethiopians and Eritreans both generally identify as habesha, regardless of ethnicity. Historically, habesha exclusively referred to the Semitic tribes and ethnicities in Eritrea and northern Ethiopia, such as the Amhara, Tigray, and Tigrinya people. Today, however, habesha is commonly used as a unifying word to describe all people in the region, regardless of ethnicity or tribe. The habesha identity and culture is a very important source of pride for many Ethiopians as it encapsulates the way their culture differs from the rest of Africa. The word is also used in Omotic and other languages, and by some ethnicities in other countries. Ethnicity and language. While there are certain cultural traditions that represent a national or habesha culture, practices differ between regions, religions, and ethnicities. Ethiopia contains over 80 different ethnic groups. Their ancestries vary, with some tracing back to Bantu or Nilotic tribes of sub-Saharan Africa, whilst others have closer heritage to the Cushitic tribes of the Middle East. According to the 2007 census, the largest ethnic groups are the Oromo, 43.4% of the population, Amhara, 26.9%, Somali, 6.2%, Tigray, 6.1%, and Sidama, 4%. Other significant ethnic populations include the Gurej, Waleda, Hadiya, and Afar people. Historically, each ethnic group has been divided into tribes and subtribes on the basis of people's descent from common ancestors. This is still the case for many living in rural areas, particularly among pastoralists in less developed regions. However, tribal organizational structures have been dismantled in many areas, particularly urban spaces. Ethnic relations. Ethiopia has been organized as an ethnic federation since 1995. This means that the country's states are divided on an ethnic basis, with most people living in the region or zone where their ethnicity is the majority. For example, most Oromos live in the Oromia region, Amharas live in the Amhara region, Tigrayans live in the Tigray region, and so forth. The idea behind this state system was to allow ethnic groups more political autonomy. However, it is widely believed that this government structure has overly politicized ethnic identity and created more sectarian tension. Moreover, many people have ethnically mixed heritage and may not feel a close affiliation with one homogeneous ethnic identity. Most people living in central Ethiopia, the capital city, Addis Ababa, prefer to identify as simply Ethiopian, but are required to associate with an ethnic identity. It is generally believed that those belonging to an ethnic group with political power have better access to services and face fewer bureaucratic barriers. National identity and pride. It is common to encounter quite patriotic views among Ethiopians. Many feel their country has great cultural depth and wealth in comparison to others. For example, there is a general expectation that an Ethiopian living overseas will eventually want to return or stay connected to their country, regardless of improved living circumstances elsewhere, as their culture is incomparable. Ethiopians also share a deep pride in the country's legacy and what it symbolizes as an historically independent African nation. The Ethiopian Empire, also known as Abyssinia, was one of the last active empires in the world. Its strong statehood was a key to Ethiopia's successful resistance of colonization. The fact that the culture was untouched by colonialism and continues to be taught in its original form by its own people is a massive source of pride for Ethiopians. Political history. Ethiopia's final emperor, Haile Selassie, was overthrown by a coup in 1974. A military government, known as the Derg, was established in his place, and Ethiopia was declared a socialist state. The Derg became known as a ruthless regime that carried out extrajudicial killings, limited political freedoms, and repressed opponents in order to maintain its power. During the Derg era, many ongoing internal conflicts erupted as multiple rebel groups fought against the power of government, and different ethnic groups fought for independence, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. There was also a war with neighboring Somalia that came at a high human cost. Multiple conflicts and government-sanctioned violence resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths and large displacement as people fled the country. It is estimated over 30,000 people were killed between 1977 and 1987 alone on suspicion of anti-government activity during a period known as the Red Terror, or Ki Shibir. Ethiopia was also plagued by severe droughts that caused widespread famine over the 20th century. Current situation. Ethiopia's political history may still be a sensitive issue, particularly for those who were displaced. Every Ethiopian family is likely to have their own personal experiences of the era of the Derg or the effects of the war with Eritrea. However, there tends to be a generational divide in attitudes. For example, those among the younger generation of Ethiopians tend to harbor less hostility against Eritrea than those who were directly affected by violence. Today, many people are more concerned with present-day matters, such as internal conflict and ethnic tension. There continue to be localized regional conflicts between the government and certain tribes or ethnicities in specified regions. Social structure and interactions. The majority of the Ethiopian population belongs to the lower class, living in small villages or sprawling urban settlements surrounding cities. Roughly 80% of Ethiopians live rurally. The capital city is the only urban area with over 1 million people. A sizable middle class exists in cities. These people are not necessarily part of the elite or the lower class. For example, they might be families that have international contacts or support from relatives living overseas. Collective life and community belonging. There is a very strong community focus embedded in Ethiopian culture. People are often mutually reliant on their relatives and neighbors. This collectivistic aspect of the culture is described as mahibarawi neuro, literally meaning collective life. Individuals are expected to put others before themselves in order to be a meaningful member of society. Those people who are not similarly kind and helpful may not receive support during times of need. As the government cannot be relied on to provide social support, one's welfare is usually dependent on the generosity of their family and friends. For example, it is common for a family to send their daughter to a different city to care for a relative if they fall sick. 13 individuals may also receive social, emotional, and financial support from the broader community and public when going through particular hardship. Local churches and mosques often play a key role in mobilizing community support. However, this community-minded generosity must be reciprocated for it to be received. Economy of Ethiopia. The economy of Ethiopia is a mixed and transition economy with a large public sector. The government of Ethiopia is in the process of privatizing many of the state-owned businesses and moving toward a market economy. The banking, telecommunication, and transportation sectors of the economy are dominated by government-owned companies. Ethiopia has one of the fastest-growing economies in the world and is Africa's second most populous country. Many properties owned by the government during the previous regime have now been privatized or are in the process of privatization and the liberalization of its financial sector in the near future. However, certain sectors such as telecommunications, financial and insurance services, air and land transportation services, and retail are considered as strategic sectors and are expected to remain under state control for the foreseeable future. Almost 50% of Ethiopia's population is under the age of 18. Addis Ababa. There's no getting away from the fact that Addis fits the bill of being a big, dusty, overcrowded city. But it's also home of the African Union, headquarters of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and at an altitude of 2,450 meters, the world's fourth highest capital city. Its name translates to new flower in Amharic. Ethiopia for vegetarians. Ethiopian cooking is some of the tastiest, healthiest, and most diverse cuisine on the continent. And unlike many African countries, it's a haven for vegetarians. The simple reason for this is that most Ethiopians follow a particular strand of Orthodox Christianity that prohibits the eating of any animal products on Wednesdays and Fridays. And the happy byproduct of this for herbivores is that restaurants tend to always have a few deliciously spicy vegan stews on the menu. It also means that when you say that you don't eat meat, they'll actually understand the idea, instead of replacing the beef you requested be left off your pizza with, say, chicken.